Oh, we're back.
We're back at last.
We are. Did you miss us? I hope you did.
We do apologise that we were off air last week.
We were. We had some illness within the podcast. Neil was ill during the week when we planned to record, and then we rescheduled, and then I got sick.
You did. You got sick.
I got proper sick, yeah.
I think that's because you keep going to the gym. No, I mean that.
You're being serious, yeah.
I'm being quite serious. It's all that air that keeps recirculating and recirculating in gyms. But recirculated sweat, really, isn't it? Ooh, sexy. Recirculated sweat.
You know, I'd rather
Sounds
not...
like some awful gay novel, you know.
God, what a lovely way to start the podcast after coming
well,
back.
that'll wake them up. That'll make them turn the volume up.
Oh dear. Well, yes, we're back. We did miss last week. We did feel bad we couldn't release an episode, but here we are.
Very bad, actually.
Yeah, we were kind of working out what we were going to do, but I was so ill last week. There was no way we were going to get an episode out. But should we just dive straight into it? You got any stories?
Well, I'm going to tell you, you laughing at me about that gym business.
Oh, okay, go on. Have you got?
I know of a situation. Two of my colleagues, several years ago, were gym buddies, as they say. Sounds like another gay novel.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, gym
buddies.
And they went to the same gym. In fact, I think it was the fitness centre of the school. I'm not sure. But anyway, they both ended up getting a virus.
Ooh.
And I wondered if it was because they kept going down the gym and that air circulates.
Well, there's just the whole thing during COVID, wasn't it? You had to wipe down, all the gyms shut, and then when you went back, you had to wipe down all the surfaces. I think people were less likely to do that now. I don't think people are. I think we've kind of got over the COVID phase of worrying about germs.
Yeah, it's true. And also, we're back to full buses, things like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, we were just saying it's 4 years.
It's 4 years since the
lockdown.
Since the lockdown, more or less.
Near enough, isn't it?
Where were we when we locked down? Where were we? I was sitting in front of the television that Tuesday night, listening to Boris Johnson's announcement.
I think most of us were. I remember sitting there with my parents. I didn't quite believe it. And we were like, "Oh, 2 weeks. How will we survive 2 weeks with each other?" Because we're only the small family. There's only three of us, which we'll link in today's episode of Being Only Children.
Exactly.
But yeah, I remember it, and we were like, "Oh, 2 weeks. How will we survive?" And it ended up being God knows how many months, and it was nearly a year, I suppose, all in all, wasn't it? It was crazy, and. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that.
We
it's a bit
got
depressing.
there.
We did. We made it.
And it's history now.
It is.
But it was 4 years ago. Doesn't time fly? But not when we're having fun. We weren't then, I'm sure.
We definitely weren't. But I think we are now.
We are now. And because we're having fun, we hope you'll have fun with today's episode.
Welcome to Hello Dear, the podcast where age is just a number and opinions come with a touch of laughter. I'm Ciaran, the young perspective on the twists and turns of life today.
And I'm Neil, the seasoned voice of yesterday, with a flair for drama and a love for life. Together we're here to chat about everything under the sun, from the latest trends to the timeless tales of our own experiences. So, grab your favourite beverage, get comfy, and join us as we explore the complexities of life.
Fantastic. Lovely. So, I'm an only child. You're sort of an only child. Well, you kind of grew up as an only child. Now you...
Yes, I did. I was an only child till I was 14.
Which I think is probably the kind of key...
Yes.
Life growing up, kind of. That's your kind of key stages.
Yeah.
We popped a little thing on... Like I said, we intended to record last week. So you may have seen some TikToks and Instagrams. We're asking for your questions. So we're going to get to them towards the end of the episode. Your questions about being an only child, our experiences, blah, blah, blah. But I think we'll kick off as to what it was like to grow up as an only children.
Kick off, Ciaran.
Kick off. Okay. I suppose first and foremost, I don't know what it's like to have siblings, so I can't compare to what it is like to have siblings. So I can only assume, what it would have been like to have siblings growing up. I think I have a much closer relationship with my parents than children who have siblings, being an only child. And I think I'm probably I learned to be independent a lot younger. I think I've always kind of pushed myself and, I always kind of had those characteristics. I was actually reading about this And there was a really interesting fact that only children tend to have older friends because they're around people who are older when they're young. So, I had friends, I had some friends when I was younger, but my parents would always have their friends around. And it wasn't like I could go play with my brother and sister or, when those were around. I had to sit at the dinner table and communicate and talk to them. And, they were adults. They were 30, 40 years older than me, which I think is where those kind of elements of independence, and people always used to say to me, "Oh, you act much older than the age that you are." I think that's where that came from. I am rambling a bit here, aren't I?
No, not
No?
at all.
Okay.
It's very interesting. Did you ever want to have a brother or a sister?
Oh yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, I remember asking my parents, and just speaking about adoption and all these things, but I don't think I was ever lonely, but there were definitely times where I wish I had a brother or sister to talk to when I didn't want to speak to my parents. I have a super close relationship with my parents. I do tell them pretty much everything. There's not much I hide from them, and that is, I think, because I didn't have any siblings, so they sort of had to take that role, which, isn't always great because your parents are your parents at the end of the day. They're there to tell you off if you do something wrong, whatever. There were certain scenarios where it would have been nice to have a brother or sister to run things by first,
Mm-hmm.
But I was never lonely, and I think I have a really good relationship with my parents now. I live at home now. We're fine. We'll get on. Because I think we are so close as a family. We can sit down and have really important conversations for, 2 or 3 hours. Will was round for dinner the other night. I started a debate with my dad about, I think it was labels in the queer community, and we had a good 45-minute to an hour-long chat over dinner, which albeit may have spoiled it for Mum and Will, but we had a really, really good, thorough, important chat. I don't think many families, or I don't know, but I know some families definitely can't have those sorts of conversations, and whether that's all to do with being an only child or whether that's just kind of the rapport we have with each other. But I think that's definitely part of it. What about you?
It was a bit different for me because till I was 14, I was an only child. And then my sister Maria turned up when I was in what's now year 9, what was then called third year. And then finally, my sister Anne turned up when I was in the sixth form. So effectively, I was an only child. What's very interesting is listening to them talk about growing up with my parents and growing up in Redcar, where we came from, in Cleveland on the North Sea coast, because their experience is different from mine. Because I'm slightly older.
Yeah.
And I was virtually on my own.
And they're quite close in age, your sisters, no?
They are,
yeah,
yes.
So
yeah,
they had each other, I suppose, growing up.
I mean, it was always Maria and Dan, Maria and Dan, Maria and Dan. And Neil was separate, you know. And it is quite a gap, actually.
How many years is it between you? So it'd be those 14 years.
14 and 17 years, you know. And I've been very much big brother.
Yeah.
And I still think of them sometimes as being young. And in fact, they're not now. No. You know, they're both, I'm sorry to say this on the airwaves, they're both
they'll kill you now.
In their 50s now. But, you know, you think of them as being younger because you've always thought of them as being younger. And I loved buying presents for them and things. But then when they were growing up, I was away to university, then I lived in London. So I was the one who came home with lots of presents and all that.
Yeah.
You know, and I love them dearly, and we are very close. You know, we speak to each other on the phone all the time. But yes, I was on my own. And I think one of the things that I did have lots of friends, some of whom are still friends of mine. 2 of whom are, one in particular, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Edmund, if you're listening in. You depend on your imagination a lot.
It's interesting you say that about your friends, because I think I felt I had to rely on my friends a lot more than maybe I should have, because I didn't have siblings.
Yes.
So my close friends and my best friends became incredibly close friends to the point where, they could have been siblings.
Same.
And I think all through my life, it's sort of been like I've always had a couple of friends who have been like siblings.
Yes.
because I haven't had siblings, and they've had to sort of replace that in a way, or kind of act,
Yeah. And I think for me, the thread that's gone through my life is friendship. I've lots of friends, and I'm very close to them, and I've stuck with them. If I maybe had brothers and sisters that were much my own age, that might be different. Obviously, if I had a partner, that would be slightly different. But that's I think that's another podcast, really.
Yeah,
But I think the imagination thing in particular, you're more dependent on your imagination. And I was reading, and I loved watching movies and getting involved in all those stories. And I wrote little plays, and I got the other kids in the street to do these plays with me.
Yeah.
I remember one was called The Tragedy of Titus. I was into Roman epics at that point. A bit like, and I loved, watching things on TV, and I was allowed to do that. Because obviously I was on my own.
I was exactly this. I remember just sitting with cameras around the house, making little videos. I would be, making all these Lego models. There was, you had to entertain yourself, and I think creativity was sort of a really good way of doing that. Because a lot of toys are designed to play with other people, or board games are with other people.
Yes.
But, you really had to, creativity was really, something that, and I think it's probably why we became quite creative people, I suppose, because you're doing it all the time. But I used to make PowerPoint presentations to keep myself occupied. Maybe I was just a bit sad and a bit of a nerd, but there was all sort and I remember making Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but using PowerPoint for like a quiz night we had, and it was just like these crazy things that I'd spend hours doing because I had to entertain myself somehow. There was no one to play with. There was no one to,
I mean, I did have some wonderful friends in the streets, one of whom I occasionally see in Redcar. He still lives there, in our street. There were a lot of us, there was young families in our street, lots of kids of the same age. And I can remember playing one marathon game of Monopoly in John and Michael's shed. There were about 6 of us, and we went back and had our lunch and came back again. I was the banker and was cheating like mad.
Of course,
yeah. But I loved it, and I loved the whole thing of being in charge.
Yes.
And that, of course, went to being a director and being a teacher. Organising people, and there was that side of it. But there was also this business of creating stories and writing scripts and being in my own world. It's very interesting. You often listen to actors talking about themselves. Very often they had a lonely childhood and were dependent on their own imagination to create characters.
Yeah.
And some great novelists. I mean, Dickens had a lonely childhood for a while and was dependent on books and on creating stories. So I think that's part of imagination. You're allowed to develop it because you're on your own.
Yeah.
For part of the time, and then when the children came along, my sisters, and obviously they were babies. My little universe was knocked apart.
I imagine
slightly.
so. Yeah.
I mean, I loved them to bits, but it's very difficult when you can't watch the television because we're getting ready to go to bed now, and it all changed around. It didn't upset me at all much, really, as far as I can remember.
It was just that change.
It was a big change, and I was still Neil on his own,
I want to going back to that point that you said earlier about you enjoy being that kind of leadership and taking that kind of charge. Did you struggle with that at any point during your childhood where you weren't given that responsibility, or those? Did you find yourself arguing with a lot of other children who maybe were the bigger brother and were used to that?
I don't know what it was. I just seemed to be. I can even remember, in primary school, I'd somehow got hold of the story of The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. Tales from Shakespeare. I remember getting this book out of the library with lovely photographs of productions of Shakespeare. Judi Dench was in one of them. There we go. And I got the story and I turned it into a little play. and we did it in front of the class at my primary school. We had a dressing up box and all that.
Yeah,
We
of
all loved all
course,
that,
yeah.
I once did. We did Sleeping Beauty, and I was the king, but I wore a cloth cap for some reason. So it lasted the summer wine meets Sleeping Beauty. But I was always the one who organised things, and encouraged to do that. I must have been a pain in the neck at times.
I see. I can agree. Like even like into secondary school, I was always the one who organised Secret Santa with our friendship group. And I remember, I'd organise it so everyone got the text and everyone knew who they had. And I'd even organise like the night, and I'd make sure that one of our dads would dress up as Santa, or one of us, like I would dress up as Santa if one of the dads wouldn't do it. Which is silly, but and there was so many versions of that like throughout my childhood and as I grew up that I'd want to do these things probably because I wanted to get together with people because I was on my own. So you'd organise these sort of events or gatherings or parties, and they may have been absolute garbage and rubbish, but I remember just wanting to be part of something bigger.
I remember I wrote a little play. It was a little comedy called "There's a Mouse in the House," and I wrote it, and I think we did it at my secondary school in a lunchtime. And one of my friends, Michael Pearson, who's no longer with us, who was in the street I lived in, he wasn't at my school, he read it and he nicked it for his own school, No copyright then.
No.
I think it does put you into a leadership thing, with people. But it definitely sort of plays with your imagination. I suppose there were moments when I must have looked sad to other people.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any siblings, brothers and sisters. And obviously other people did. People in the road, people in the school, and I quite would have liked to have had that.
Do you know the other thing that I think I found a lot is that those siblings, so say you were like the middle child, the two older siblings, those two middle children would become friends because the two older siblings are friends.
Yes.
You almost have a head start at friendships. Like you go to school and all these people had friendship groups. You're like, how did you become friends so quick? Because they all knew each other from being around each other's houses, or the older siblings were. I never had that at all.
I never had that at all, no.
I wouldn't say I struggled making friends, but I struggled to make groups of friends.
Yes, very definitely.
I always had one or two really close friends, which I found fine too.
Yeah.
But I always struggled to fit into a group, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I was like that. I wasn't one for team sports.
No, never.
In fact, I hated sport, full stop.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely hated it. Obviously, being in a play as part of, in a team, that was different. Because actually you are playing your own role. But you're in a group.
Plays were different at school though, because I feel like, especially at primary school, like everyone had to be in the play. Yeah. Whereas if you were on the rugby team or the cricket team, like you chose to do that.
Yes.
So it wasn't. Everyone came together, and you weren't necessarily respected for. Yeah. You might have been really into the play.
Yeah, I was.
Your role, but people kind of would laugh that off a bit because it was sort of like, oh, we've all got to do it. Why are you putting so much into it?
Yeah. I guess I was very precocious. I can remember there's a picture I have of me which comes back, and it's an evening, it's a Friday evening, and it's quite cold, and I'm out of the house I had an anorak, padded anorak, and it was light blue, I remember, and there was a wall by the house, a low wall, and there was a gatepost, and I'm leaning on the gatepost with my feet on the wall, like it's almost like a sofa, and learning my lines for the school play, Shakespeare's Tempest, by the way. And I can remember that vividly, and that must have been rather odd to other people.
Well, I think the next stage is then to talk about what it's now like as an adult, as an only child. So how do you think it's impacted your adult life?
When I was a young adult and a student and away from home, I found I was rather persistent and intense with my friendships because I suddenly felt that loneliness acutely.
Yeah, no, I completely...
A young person, there's a rawness about emotions, which is why I've always tried to be careful with young people at school, particularly sixth form, whatever, because your emotions are very, very raw.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be a storm in a teacup to you as the teacher, but the student
It's
doesn't
a
think
lot,
of it
yeah, of
like that
course.
at all, you know. So I think, yes, then I was clinging to people a bit,
I still find I do it now, you know.
you know.
I'm
You don't
very...
cling to me.
Well, not you.
Well, hello, dears. Neil here, just checking in. How are you doing? If you're enjoying today's episode, why not drop us a quick review on your favourite podcast platform? And don't forget to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. We love hearing and interacting with you. We are into interaction. Follow us then on social media at Hello Dear Pod for bonus content and send us a message. Finally, if you're one of our listeners on Spotify, you can interact with our Q&As and polls, which you'll find on most episodes. All our links are in the description of this episode. Now, let's get back to it.
I will never give up having a conversation with someone. So, like, I'll be texting someone and I won't stop a conversation. So,
Yeah.
you know, when someone will just stop replying, or like the conversation's dead,
Yeah.
I'll keep trying to
Yeah.
get it going because I think I enjoy that kind of communicating with other people. And I think that's given a lot of people the ick when they've been speaking to me. Or, I don't know. I think that is that kind of... There's a tiny bit of me that's still scared to be on my own.
Nothing wrong with that.
No,
But
I know what you mean, that it can be too much for
some
the person.
people.
Yeah, 100%.
And also, you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Some people aren't aware of that. And then they wonder why people reject them.
Yeah,
or,
I think I'm
or
aware
don't
that...
phone back or don't do,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I kind of... I'll push and I'll go, oh, they didn't call back because I probably did go a bit far there. You know, I did try and force a conversation out of nothing.
What this podcast is about, really, forcing conversations out of nothing. Anyway, I think it does give you an independence, though. And I've lived most of my life on my own. And I think because I was on my own as a child for most of the part of it, that has been the foundation, really. And I do find it difficult to share, or have done in the past, to share.
Do you mean sharing feelings or like physically sharing? Because I find I have a lot of alone time. I won't necessarily always talk about how I'm feeling. Like if I'm feeling rubbish, there are times where I'll just go and take myself off to a room because I know how to cope with that on my own.
That's a good thing. It's a strength.
Yes, but it can but persistently doing that isn't healthy.
No.
And I think I do have a good balance. But I think from being an only child, not having a sibling to go crying to, or you know, I think that is an element of my coping mechanism now. It can be quite a lonely one.
Yes, yeah. I have had some wonderful friends. I have got some wonderful friends who I can talk to, and always have, and if necessary, bleed over. You know, if necessary, and it's very important. But there has always been that thing in me of sorting myself out.
Yeah.
Sorting myself out. And maybe sometimes, I think particularly when I was younger and going through the gay experience when I was young, there was very much that I've got to sort this out myself.
Yeah.
I can't talk to anybody.
You
were scared to talk to people. Even when I was a young man, you know. So everything has its advantages and disadvantages, positive and negative. But yeah, I think it does make you more resilient. I think it makes you capable of sorting yourself out. Even if you have to have a good cry, you get up and you sort yourself out.
Yeah.
On the other side of it is, I think because I was kind of on my own, a lot of people came to me with their problems. I was sorting them out.
I've always felt a bit like the therapist of the group.
Yeah.
I feel like people do, and I'm nothing wrong with that. I actually quite enjoy it.
Yes, very important.
But people, I think, came to me. You know, I think there's part of them that knows like it's not going to go back to anyone. And maybe that is part of being a bit lonely, not having a huge group of friends. That you know, there is a little bit of trust that comes from that in that situation. But yeah, I definitely found people, whether that's to be with an only child or whether that's just our personas. But I definitely found people would come to me and open up and come with their struggles.
And I think there is a strength in being alone. And there's nothing wrong with being alone, you know.
No, not at all.
There's nothing wrong with solitude. And certainly if you choose to be alone, choose to be solitary for a while, that's fine. Unfortunately, in this day and age, with social media and whatever, the only way to do that properly is to switch the phone off.
Yeah.
There is a strength in being alone if you want to be alone and being solitary. And a lot of people are finding this now, that they want to be on that. People wanting to go off on a retreat of some kind. It doesn't have to be religious. They want to go away for a weekend. They want to go away for a day to sort themselves out.
Did you find being an only child made you more comfortable in the fact that you have ended up living on your own? Do you think you were more comfortable with the fact that you may not end up with someone because you were comfortable in being on your own?
I guess so. There were moments when I was 50, I went through the male menopause, if you like, what they call it, you know.
Yeah.
There's another word for it. There's far more midlife crisis.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine,
crisis.
right. Yeah.
And but there was a bit of that as well. But I did suddenly think, oh my gosh, I'm on my own. How have I ended up like this?
Yeah.
How have I ended up like this? But gradually, I am very happy on my own. I suppose I don't think I could have a partner now. There'd have to be long distance, I suppose. But but again, it's that sharing thing. I've never been that used to sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope I'm a very generous person. I always buy people nice gifts and things. But I do find it difficult to share, and to share even, responsibilities when I was a director. I mean,
Yes.
most of my life has been, I ran the drama department on my own for best part of 15 years.
Yeah.
A long time. Then my colleague Lee came along, and I found that difficult in a way because I'd been running on my own for so long.
But then that's like you said, if you were to have a partner now, you've then got to relearn how to live with someone, how to, this is your house, assuming they would come and live here, you've then got to learn to share that. That's a huge undertaking to, when you have lived so long on your own.
Even people coming to stay, which is lovely. I've got lots of friends that come and stay here. When I bought this house and I moved in, I said, I hope people will come and stay. I've got a spare room and this house is for everybody. I'd like to invite people for a meal, all of that. I'm not a recluse by a long shot. But even when people come to stay, I begin to get a little bit touchy because, things have been moved around and changed, because I'm used to being on my own, I suppose.
Do you know, it's funny because I feel the complete opposite to you when it comes to relationships. I think being an only child has made me want to have someone else. Well, I have someone else, but when it comes to relationships, I think being an only child has pushed me to have that desire to be with someone. Which is, I think, in some ways, that's why sometimes, it's hard to get over someone. I don't know whether that's any correlation to being an only child, but I think it's harder to let go of something relationship-wise because, it is that company that kind of... It's probably the same for everyone, to be fair.
I think I did want someone.
Or you did at some point.
I did want someone at some point. I did. But it was the idea of having a romantic relationship. It was the idea of.
Yeah.
In fact, someone did say to me, you're in love with being in love. Not in
Oh,
love
I think
with
we've
me.
all been in love with being in love in the past.
God, cue for a song.
Oh, that would make a good song, yeah. Do you know, just on that, it's a really fun thing. So Will, my partner, is one of 4 siblings. Every single one of those siblings has a partner, and all of those partners are only children.
Gosh.
So the 4 siblings are all dating an only child.
Gosh.
Isn't that funny?
It's weird.
I tried Googling to see if there's a correlation between big families dating only children, because is it too much? Is 4 a lot? And then, do they date an only child to have that quieter life? But I couldn't find anything.
But that wouldn't have been intentional, surely.
No, but that's what I mean.
They didn't sort of go on some dating
I'm
app.
only...
I only want an only child. If you've got siblings, don't come anywhere near me.
No, but then it's funny how it works out like that. Because obviously it wouldn't have been planned. Well, it could just be pure coincidence, but,
More likely pure coincidence, I think.
I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's odd. Very odd.
Now, I want to get on to the questions from our listeners.
Oh, I thought we'd already started.
No, I've not even found them yet.
Well, I'm 39 and told attractive. Next, good sense of humour.
So, like I said, we were going to record this episode last week, so I did pop a little story on our Instagram. If you're not following it, at Hello Dear Pod, you can find us on all social medias. So the first one came from lovely drag queen who we know, Talia Ostara.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of our favourites here. And the question is there such a thing as only child syndrome?
That's an interesting one, isn't it?
I think there is. I just don't think
Probably.
every only child has it. And I think that comes down to how you're parented as an only child.
Right. Explain.
So,
Elucidate.
like,
Expand.
only child syndrome, I see it as being the typical only child, spoilt brat. You get everything you want, and you're very selfish. You can't share. I see only child syndrome as being the stereotype of an only child. And I don't think we all are. I think we probably all have tiny little aspects of it.
Yes.
Like you said,
Yeah.
we probably struggle to share a little bit more than someone with siblings.
Yes.
I think I have probably led a more privileged childhood. Not that we've had tons of money, but, at the end of the day, there wasn't two siblings to have to split an income between. It was just me. I think I probably was a bit more privileged in that sense, and money wasn't as much of a concern. My parents were never rich. They both worked in the public sector. Like, we're not a rich family by any means. But there was more money to share around, I guess. So I think in that sense, yes, I've probably led a more privileged life. But don't get me wrong, I wasn't gifted hundreds of pounds worth of presents. There were limits put in place. And I think that just purely comes from good parenting.
I would agree with that. I think we've already discussed some of the things that would break that idea of the syndrome of being an only child. But I think particularly if, the family are very rich or whatever and actually throw money at... But they could throw money at 3 or 4 siblings. Exactly.
And there is that stereotype of only children. It probably occurs more in only children purely just because there is more money around.
Yes, yeah.
But it definitely isn't the case for every only child to be like that at all.
I mean, I had a more privileged upbringing than my 2 sisters.
Yeah, exactly.
For instance.
Yeah.
But hey, next question.
Next question came from my good friend Darcy, who I met at university. A lovely, lovely girl. Hello, Darcy. Do you think being an only child makes you better or worse at sharing? Tackle that stereotype.
Probably worse, I would think.
I think it's something we have to learn.
Yeah.
We're definitely not good at it from the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you know what's really funny is I could share some things, but there's other things I'd still struggle with sharing. Like my things I've now, like my records.
Yes.
I'm very particular if someone wants to put a record on. No, let me show you.
Likewise.
It's kind of protective about my things that I've kind of now collect and things.
Same here.
But, if it's to share what's on the telly, fine, put something on the telly. I don't care.
Yeah.
So it depends what it is, but also we're definitely worse at sharing than people with siblings.
I would agree
because we've
with
never
you
had to.
Yeah. And that's, for me, living alone, that's even more, it's even more because you're on your own and these are your things, And,
yeah, exactly. Everything in this house is yours.
Things together, that sort of thing. Yeah. There are other times when we're very keen to share because we live on our own.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
And we're on our own and we like to share with other people,
100%, yeah.
But
yeah, do keep an eye on our socials because when we have an episode planned, we may ask for your input, and it's really nice to hear from you guys. Cracking episode, I think. I think we tackled a lot there.
It was actually quite autobiographical as well. Got to the depths. And we need to get to the depths, ladies and gentlemen.
We do.
And thanks for listening in to yet another edition of Hello Dear.
And we'll see you next week. We will definitely see you next week.
We will be there next week,
We will.
even if we're in our hospital beds.
Yes, we will definitely make an episode for next week.
We will. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Hello Dear, presented by Ciaran and Neil. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts for a new episode every single Wednesday. In the meantime, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok under @HelloDearPod, and you'll find bonus content and behind-the-scenes stuff there. Want to get involved further? And for Spotify listeners, you can interact with our Q&As on each episode. And for all other platforms, including Spotify, just click the link in the description of this podcast to send us a written or voice-recorded message. See you next week.